No clue is not enough.
Today I'm going to talk about the medical training of elephants. So I'm first going to introduce real quick the medical training if some of you don't really know what it's about, and then I'm going to talk about the case of elephants. So medical training is basically the training of animals, especially in captivity, to get them used to medical acts and contacts with the zookeepers and the humans to facilitate the interventions on them and avoid anesthesia the most possible. So like they will train them to follow the medical procedures without being asleep, and for them it will be more like a game than a real procedure, so there will be reduced stress and reduced panic in the in the room. So yeah, that's it. So you see, for example, the acts that can be performed, or opening the mouth, or showing their limbs, things like that. So it's especially important for the species that are like dangers being anesthetized. So for example, for equines and felines, there's a lot of information about anesthesia in captivity, so there's not that much trouble with making them sleep. So actually they're not really trained. But for animals like pachyderms, it's really important because there's a big risk of anesthesia for them because of their weight. Like putting them on one side represents a really huge cardiorespiratory risk. So that's why it's easier if we have other ways to have an intervention on them. Same for every marine mammals. It's easier to not put them asleep since most of them have a voluntary respiration, so it represents a big risk for them to be anesthetized. So it's way easier if they're trained for the small procedures to just be awake. For great apes as well, because I don't know, and birds as well, because yeah, anesthesia on them can be tricky. So it's really important for these kind of animals, and it's actually easier because you can have like medical acts that you couldn't perform if they were asleep. So it's actually like helping you making other actions on them that you couldn't do if you were not training them. Also, you save a lot of time since you don't have to prepare them to be asleep, and you don't have to just wait and like surveillance and everything. There is a gain in security because the animals are not stressed, they're not panicking, they're not crushing people and being dangerous. And also you know the animal health way better since you're like, you can see them more often and do the medical procedures way more often since you don't have to put them asleep. There's less danger for the health. So it's way easier for them to be trained, and then everyone's happy and less stressed and everything. So in the case of elephants, the medical training is especially really important. There is actually standards that are created by the World Association of Zoos and Aquarium that say that the elephants in captivity have to be like taken care of in a certain way. There's a lot of standards. I have them if you want. I think they're in the bibliography. And there's all of these procedures that have to be done like every day. So obviously you can't put the elephant to sleep every day, so you need to be able to access them. But they're really dangerous animals because if they're stressed or something, they can just like walk on people by accident, and it's really dangerous. And there has been a lot of accidents with males in zoos, so that's why they should be trained. But it's actually quite easy with them, because they're really clever animals, so they're usually trained. There's a lot of different strategies for the medical training. especially about like the different kind of contacts you can have with the animal. I think the most common one is the work wall. So it's like limited contact. You're like the trainer is still protected by a wall, like a barrier, like this. There's openings, like you see for the feet and here for the ears. And basically, yeah, it's just in case something happens and the animal is stressed for some reason, the trainer is still protected. But on the other hand, there's still a lot of access to the animal through all the holes, and you can put the target through them. So it's usually the most used one. Then there's like the ties strategies. Like you see here, they're like linked. Their foot is just attached on the floor, so they can't go around wherever they want. But there's a closer contact between the trainer and the animal. I've seen when I was doing my research that it's used a lot with cows because I mean they're less likely to crush you, obviously, so it's less dangerous. But also maybe because it's just through the fence, it's harder for calves. So yeah, for this, it's just closer contact, but also more dangerous. So it depends on the level of stress of the animal and if the animal is not too dangerous around humans. And then you want to have so the work wall with limited contact, the ties with more contact, but more dangerous. And then there's a contagion cage. It's the same as the work wall, but instead of an open space behind the elephant, it's really between four walls. So he can't really go that much far away. So it's usually like used with animals that are really stressed, and it's not always used because they need more space to be able to be comfortable, and also like so their training is more accurate because if they're always between four walls, then you don't know if they're doing like they're obeying because they have to or if they're doing it willingly. So this is used, but usually it's used only with stressed animals and like situations that imply that it needs to be used, but not all the time. So then about the teaching, it's usually they use open conditioning systems. So I mean usually the 2 or 3 zoos that are actually documenting on this. But yeah, so they use especially positive reinforcement. The 3 others are not really that much used. Do you know about it, or do you want me to explain? Everyone knows? It's fine. Okay. So they use positive reinforcement, most of them. So using especially fruits as the positive cues, like foods. But sometimes, like there's one elephant in a zoo in Washington. There was an article about it, and she does like she likes food, but for her it's way more efficient to give verbal cues and affection. So that was really cute. But most of the time it's just food. And if they have to use punishment, they usually don't. But if they use punishment, it's really not something painful, and it could be, for example, the most efficient way apparently would be to ignore the elephant because they like attention. So yeah, that's it. And if they do negative reinforcement, it's the same. Usually they don't, but if they use it, they would use it like a stimulus that's really not that painful because I mean you don't want to upset something that's that huge. It's dangerous for you. The reasons of the training for elephants are like the other animals. You don't want to put them asleep all the time, but also it's to be sure that you make them exercise like physically because they're wild animals. They're used to walk long distances all day, and their body needs to express this behavior. So you would avoid to have stereotypy. So yeah, you need the physical exercise. For the same reason, you need also mental stimulation because I mean, it's better if your animal is clever. And also to have like cooperation from the animal and to create a relationship between the animal and the trainer. So more like for improvement of social skills because elephants are quite social as animals. So yeah, those are the reasons. The different tools that can be used are the ones usually used in medical training with every animal. So the targets, usually they're like, it looks like it's small here, but for elephants, of course, it's bigger. It's like 1.5 meters long because they have to go through the wall usually. And with the ties situation, when you're closer to the elephant, there's another tool that's used. It's the hooks. Maybe you saw it with the Indians or Thai guys that use it like when they're training the elephant with contradictory methods that we're not going to talk about. But yeah, it's also used with the trainers, like proper trainers, because I mean, you don't want to bring pain to the animal, but also you want to live, so you should be equipped in case of. So that's what they use. They also use sometimes like a clicker for noises for the animal to associate the noise to the reward, and then when they see the noise and the reward are associated, then they try to get the noise away, so they can use a clicker for that. And also for the rewards, well, lots of food, bananas usually, but also apparently crunchy food works a lot, so like, I don't know, celery and stuff. For the rewards, they use, so like bananas, fruits, so it's not a huge calorie intake, but still they have to take it into account that since they train the elephant at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, you need to take into account the food that you give him as treats, so you avoid like obesity or just like unbalanced diet. So also the trainer is really important, because if it's not someone qualified or just qualified but not in this, it's not gonna work, because it's really like the elephants are really like they're social, but they have a certain way to work, and if you don't know, like they're sensitive, so you need to be like used to elephants to work in that and train them. So the training sessions are always the same model, like the same way to go. So they first start with simple placement exercises. So like for example, they will ask the elephant to be like this side on the wall, then the other side, and maybe like put his foot through the hole or something. But it's really just placement, like localized. Then they will proceed to the examination, like physical examination. So that's when they will ask, for example, the elephant, like when I showed you with the holes, they can ask the elephant to put the ear through the hole, to the hole, and they can take blood samples from the ears, or like the foot through the hole is for this, and different examination processes that they need. Then they will ask for particular exercises, because they teach them the medical things, but also they teach them tricks sometimes, because I mean, why not? So yeah, that's more of the like social part and mental development part, and so then they will do those exercises. Then they will always try to teach new exercises. So for example, I don't know, if the animal knows how to show one leg, then you will try with the other one, things like that. And then they will go again with an exercise that's already known, because they don't want to finish on a failure. Like sometimes the animal just doesn't want to learn this trick, and you need to finish the session with something positive, because else they don't want to train anymore. So with that, they finish with something that the elephant already knows, so he finishes with a little treat and he's happy. And then there's an end signal, so he knows he's free to go. And there's the reward. About the reward, it's actually not only in the end, because if you make him do a lot of tricks and you wait to give him the reward, they can be a bit pissed, and then it's dangerous again. So usually they get a reward after every trick they do. And sometimes at the end there's also a reward. It's like, oh, you worked well today, here's another banana. So that's it. Yeah, the results, so you can have different type of medical acts that can be performed. So like it could be really simple ones like bathing without just being crazy because of the water. Usually elephants really like water. That's really important for the skincare, because they need hydration on their skin. Usually there's like a mud pad where they are in the nut cage. I don't know how you say it. place they are in the zoo, but sometimes there's not, so you need to bathe them a lot. Also, presenting the food is really important because their food really needs to be like taken care of every day. It's in the standards of the zoo association thing, and it's really like every day they need to be washed and taken care of, like the cuticle under and everything, because they can have abscesses. It's really important. So that's one of the first things they're taught. Then they know how to keep them here, which is important for the blood sample. If for some reason you can't manage to do the blood sample in the ear, you can also do it in the leg. So usually you always manage to do it, but the most used part is the ear, like behind the ear. Then there's also the trunk washing. So that's not really like a washing, like a medical washing. They need to be washed. It's more of like you put a physiological serum and then you get back what they blow. And then you can analyze this to see that there's no problem with their respiratory tract. So like for pneumonias and other things, it's really useful because you can't always do radiographies with those animals. So yeah, and then also they're taught to stand still during ultrasounds, for example, like interrectal ultrasounds. So like the animal doesn't move, which is important because you wouldn't want to be the vet if the animal moves. So yeah, that's it. There's also other things that they know how to do, like they're weighted a lot, so they know how to go into the scale and quite good. They know, yeah, they accept they're taught to accept the oral medication as well, and also injections and vaccines. So yeah, I have 3 videos. I'm not gonna play like all of them. If you want, we can watch one now. Else you have the presentation as you want. You want to watch one now? Okay. You don't see there is that, okay, it looks like they obey directly. Of course not. This is one that already had the tricks shown. In real life, it asks for the trainer to be really patient because he's gonna give the cue, but of course the elephant's not gonna understand what he wants. So normally he's gonna try different gesture until he does the right one, and then you give the reward, and the animal will understand after 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times that that's what he needs to do to get a reward. So until the animal does the gesture you want willingly, you have to try and try and try and try again. So it's really long actually, but apparently it works well with elephants. So in conclusion, yeah, medical training is a really useful tool that enables vets and zookeepers to monitor the health of elephants and other animals in captivity. Thanks to this training, it's like elephants are taking an active part in their health actually. And yeah, it helps our vets and our zookeepers to take care of our favorite pachyderm. So That's it, and thank you.